Welcome to Microcollege. My name is Jacob Hunt. I'm the director of Thoreau College, a microcollege located in rural southwestern Wisconsin. If you're listening to this in late 2025, there's still time to apply. A couple slots left for our spring 2026 Metamorphosis Gap semester starting in early February. We also have open applications for our fall 2026 Metamorphosis Gap semester, for our summer 2026 Driftless Field School, which starts on July 1st. And also, we are now accepting applications for our fellowship programs, our Youth Initiative Teaching Fellowship, High School Teaching Fellowship, our Driftless Folk School Fellowship, and our Scholar or Artist in Residence program. If you're interested in any of those, check us out at thoreaucollege.org. Today on the podcast, I'm excited to have a couple of guests to speak about a kindred organization at work in the South, in Alabama. This is Lamplight, which runs a Nunnian-inspired summer program, and a connected organization, the Sand Mountain Cooperative Education Center. Lots to talk about here. Our guests today are Julia Machlin and Kayleigh Johnson. Well, thank you, Julia and Kayleigh, for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you. Glad to be here.
Julia Machlin hails from Ithaca in the Finger Lakes region of upstate New York, where she first developed a passion for student-led education. After completing undergrad, she found herself toggling between working in education and the labor movement, including teaching social studies in East Harlem and working with various worker centers and the SEIU in hopes of finding a marriage between two worlds working towards student and worker empowerment. It wasn't until she found Lamplight and the work of the Sand Mountain Cooperative Education Center, the SMCEC, where she discovered a niche and intersection of people trying to solve similar problems. For the last 4 years, Julia has been a returning Lamplight staff member and now sits on the board of SMCEC. She is also one of the creators of Glow and Grow, a cooperatively structured fundraising program that writes grants for burgeoning nonprofits in Alabama and trains students to simultaneously be worker owners and grant writers. Some of her favorite SMCEC memories include getting Frank Hurricane to perform at the 2025 Brick and Barn Conference and holding fundraisers in her friends' Brooklyn bars. When she isn't in Alabama or Ithaca, Julia can be spotted in New York City, completing her master's in education at Teachers College at Columbia University. She looks forward to a future of building worker power by way of empowering students in and out of the classroom. Kayleigh Johnson is from the small town of Douglas, Alabama, located within Marshall County. When she was 12, she became involved with Lamplight as part of their very first group of campers. Throughout the years, Kayleigh has become more involved with Lamplight and is now a staff member. Outside of Lamplight, Kayleigh is working towards her general business degree as a freshman at the University of Alabama, where she later hopes to continue on to law school. Kayleigh aspires to combine everything Lamplight and college will teach her into a career as a nonprofit lawyer who stands up for worker owners everywhere. This aspiration stems from working with SMCEC and other nonprofits in contact with Sand Mountain Cooperative Education Center. One of her favorite memories from Lamplight was in her last year as a camper, when her and 2 other campers plus 1 staff conspired to purchase the staircase and charge everyone a toll to use it during the real-world simulation experiment. Thank you so much for those detailed stories about your lives. On the podcast, we always ask about people's young adulthood. I think we'll have Kayleigh go second because that will be a great introduction to what Lamplight is. So maybe Julia, you can just expand a little bit about what you said there. I think in particular, I'm interested always in hearing about, were there particular moments, particular people, particular contexts when you felt, when there was something significant that happened during this period when you were 18 to 21 years old. And what were you doing during that time?
Yeah, okay. So, 18 to 21, I was in college in Ithaca, New York. I think, like I mentioned, I grew up in this small, very odd, kind of weird college town, and so many people that are in our organization are either from Ithaca or connected to Ithaca in some way. Either they're part of the Telluride Association or they went to Cornell or they're part of the association and they go to Ithaca for retreats. It's like many people have made contact with it at some point, and I have a lot of love for it. And it's like a really quirky, weird place. There's a lot of catchphrases for it. One of the catchphrases that's one of my favorite is that it's 10 square miles surrounded by reality, which I think kind of speaks to how it's like this weird, quirked up, like little liberal bubble pinprick in otherwise like very rural upstate New York, and kind of like a marriage of the two. So I grew up there. I stayed there for college when I was 18, which I was not necessarily expecting to stay there for college, but I did anyways, which I think was great. I definitely like founded and like shaped many more of my ideas, but being surrounded by these people that were steeped in like alternate forms of education, alternate forms of medicine, alternate forms of like thinking and everything, I think definitely shaped a lot of my ideas. When I was in college, Kayleigh, this is gonna make me sound so old, but it was COVID 5 years ago. Um, so when I was in college, I was also part of like doing COVID school online, not being sure if I was gonna stay in school or leave. I decided that it was cheaper and more cost effective and time effective to stay in school and kind of like bang it out. So that's what I did. I'm thinking like 21, turned 21 during COVID at home. And then I guess towards the end of my 21st year, I was preparing to do Lamplight for the first time. I was studying abroad in Ireland the spring semester of my senior year. I had originally wanted to go to a Spanish-speaking country because I needed to do Spanish, like a Spanish language for my studies, but they had canceled all of those study abroad programs. I had never been outside of North America, just the US and Toronto, so I really wanted to travel on my college's dime. One of the only places that I could go is Ireland. So I went to Ireland my spring semester senior year. I took like crazy, weird Irish Marxism classes and wrote my thesis and applied to jobs and had a lot of meetings with our coworkers and friends about Lamplight because when I got back, I went to Alabama for the first time. So that's where I was.
Cool. Yeah, so you mentioned the Telluride Association. Is that, were you connected with them at all, or is that?
Kind of. I would say that there are these, and you'll see through our stories, because I'm sure Kayleigh and I will tell a couple, maybe a couple of the same ones. There are these like points of connection, and then these webs of how people know each other, as I'm sure you have too,
Mhm.
in Viroqua, and these like threads, and there are similar threads of connection, how people know each other. One of those is Telluride. So growing up in Ithaca, I was aware of the Telluride House. It is on like Frat Row, close to downtown Ithaca by Cornell. So my brother went to Cornell. He lived not there, but in a house that was literally like two doors down. So I like knew where it was geographically for a long time. And then as I grew up, some of my friends from Ithaca High School went to Cornell. Some of them were a part of the Telluride Association. Some of them had parents who were professors who were guest speakers at the Telluride Association. And I would say that was probably my formal entry and then how I met people that were eventually involved in Lamplight.
Yeah. So the Telluride Association is, yeah, an important part of the Lamplight story, as I understand it, and is an organization we haven't really talked about here on the podcast. I don't know. Yeah, this is a LL Nunn who founded Deep Springs College, which has come up frequently on this podcast. Important inspiration for our work we're doing at Thoreau. The other educational organization founded actually earlier by LL Nunn back in the early 20th century was the Telluride Association. Would you care to say anything about like what the activities of the Telluride Association are now, or?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
can speak not as somebody who is a member, but as someone that has been there and has been to convention as like a someone who is part of a Nunnian institution and organization. I can
Yeah.
speak on it. I've had many a jerk tofu at their dining room table. It's really great. Where Kayleigh has met and maybe can speak to the fact that we were able to bring some Lamplight campers there a couple years ago. So
Oh,
we all
cool.
got to meet the chef Londell, who is like a quintessential Ithaca community member. Yeah, but I know, so what Telluride does now, there are the programs and the association. So there's also a little bit of the separation. They have two houses, one at Cornell and one at the University of Michigan, and they function as places where if somebody gets into the Telluride program at one of those locations, they can live in one of these self-governed houses for free room and board, so they can live there and they can get meals and get all of those benefits as long as they abide by the rules, which are self-governing, which means people, right, facilitate these meetings and decide what they do and what they do with their like the money, their budget together. So that's one part. And then there's the association, which is the board, which are some people that have been involved in that for some time or some time ago. And they also do TAS, which is a summer program, which is also where some inspiration came for Lamplight because some of our co-founders were either in TAS or involved in TAS in some way, which are summer programs in a shortened and condensed version at either of the houses for, I believe, like 15 to 17-year-olds.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. That was very, very concise. Yeah, I think the Telluride Association is, yeah, very unique, like like no other, kind of like Deep Springs, doing things but the core of it is self-governance, right? Both the houses, the summer program, and also the association itself, which is like a board that's a lot bigger than a typical nonprofit board because it's one of its purposes is to practice self-governance as an educational activity for the members. I was a member of that board for a couple of years back in the day, as Deep Springers often are as well. So I know a little bit about that. I've been to the house there in Ithaca a few times. So yeah, it's great to share a bit about that with our audience. Should also mention that part of the impetus for this conversation is that we are going to be hosting here in Viroqua a little conference of LL Nunn inspired organizations, most of whom have been here on the podcast in the past. So that'll be happening in January, and we're really excited to be welcoming Lamplight as a participant in that that gathering. So okay, Kayleigh, yeah. So I think maybe for the purpose of this, it'd be great if you could actually maybe go back a little bit earlier than our typical age range, and yeah, because it's clear that Lamplight is an important part of this story. So, and you were one of the very first Lamplight campers, right? So yeah, can you maybe tell what was that like? How did you get involved with it? And yeah, what kept you coming back?
So when I was 12, I got a call from my stepdad's cousin at the time, and she said, "Hey, me and some friends are doing this camp in Guntersville. It's totally free. Would you maybe want to come and just like check it out and see what it's about?" And I said, "Okay, sure." She picks me up. I go there and I met with four other kids who are way older than me, and I'm the youngest one there, and it's kind of intimidating, but it was all very fun. And overall, like through the 3 weeks we spent together, we got to know each other. And now, even today, those are some of my best friends. Um, so that first week, honestly, was us just getting to know each other. It was kind of rocky, kind of, I think a lot of us called it unstructured. I think they bring that up in conversation a lot. And at one point, all of us knew something had to change, and we locked the staff out of the room to have a conversation on our own. And they weren't very happy about that, but it's all settled now, so it's okay. Um, but basically, we just knew we needed to come up with a more concrete goal of what Lamplight was going to be and how to get there. And I think that summer we definitely accomplished it because now we are on track and we're welcoming new campers every year, more and more. COVID did throw a wrench in that. I was not college age. I was maybe 13 at the absolute oldest. Um, so that was kind of rough to navigate, but we did a lot of Zoom meetings and which helped us prepare for off-season work, which we also do over Zoom. But after that, we had welcomed a few new campers. They all quickly fit in. And every year it just keeps getting bigger and bigger. And I think, honestly, the reason I keep coming back is it's such a good, powerful community. And I think we do a lot of good within the community that we're involved in, which is like Guntersville, Arab areas. We do a lot of volunteering within the community. Um, we throw fundraisers, we throw community parties. And I think, honestly, just like I said, like the community of it all keeps bringing me back.
Yeah. So can you set the geographical context for us? This is northern Alabama. Like what's the landscape like there? What's the economy like? And what just tell us a little bit about this place.
So all of this is located up in Marshall County, like you said, northern Alabama. Um, Most of the land surrounding Guntersville is either farmland or it's a lake. Um, there are some commercial parts, but bigger cities are usually at least an hour away, so it's pretty rural. Um, and most of the families that live there have lived there for a very, very long time. So it's very like close knit. I don't know how to say it, like I guess just old land. So it's very hard for like newcomers to come in. And then as for like the economic um structure, I wouldn't say it's a very poor area, but in regards to bigger cities and bigger areas, it's definitely less financially stable, I guess you would say. So Douglas, the town where I'm from, very close to Guntersville, the average annual income there is around 22,000 a year, I believe. So you can imagine it's quite low. And so I think having this free program where kids could go was really something to uplift this community.
Yeah. Yeah, so this is the rural South, and yeah. So the can we zoom in now? Where does the Lamplight program happening? What's the site like, and what's the history of that place?
So we have a plot of land right off of Lake Guntersville. And originally it was one of our founders' family's land, Daniel Marshall. His grandfather had built a small cabin on the land where him and his family would go almost every single summer. And as everyone got older, it kind of like people didn't go there as much and it kind of started to crumble. And the land wasn't being used. And so Daniel decided to try and take it and make something of it. And so every year, the campers were part of this too. We would work on the cabin and try to get it back up to standard. Um, so now I think we've done a pretty good job, honestly. But so sorry,
Yeah, no, that's
no, I'm blanking now.
yeah. Julia, do you want to add anything to that, or yeah?
Julia.
Yeah, I think you did a great job. And yeah, that's part, I think, of the lore of this land in Gunnersville, especially, is that it came from Daniel's family members. I think one interesting thing, again, going back to like these webs of connections and how we all know everyone. So Daniel's grandfather, who we all call Papa, who passed away in 2015. That's when Daniel got the deed to this cabin, or 2015, 2016, I think around there. They discovered this cabin. Daniel had grown up going to Alabama, but did not know that this place existed. And so Papa was one of the chief fire marshals in Birmingham. When you are a fire marshal, you have 24 hours on, 48 hours off. And so through the years, as he worked, he just built lots of properties all throughout Alabama. He built a beach house down in the Gulf Shores, a couple small cabins in, I think, Prattville and other places, and then this cabin, which was literally poured from cement. So when Daniel and his family went there, like 10 years ago, nobody had lived there for such a long time. But like a cement block is not going anywhere. So one of the people that helped renovate the cabin, and now I hope you and anyone who listens to the podcast who wants to can come and visit. It's really beautiful, and has these Estonian, Scandinavian features inside. These beautiful wide windows and beautiful original wood paneling on the ceiling. Part of that is because of Papa's handiwork. Part of that is because one of our friends who helped renovate the cabin was one of Daniel's roommates when he lived at the Telluride Association at Cornell. And I think part of doing a project is getting your friends to come out of the woodwork. And, at this point in the early 20s, Daniel called up his friend who was a recently licensed architect and was like, "Hey, Carl Pops, I know that you're in Boston. Do you want to come work on this project?" And he was like, "Yeah, of course." And now we have a beautiful Estonian cabin on right on the lake in Alabama.
Cool. So this, Kayleigh, the first year, what year was that when you went to the first camp?
I want to say 2019.
2019.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So you mentioned some of the things that happened there, organizing events, interacting with some service projects in the local community. But yeah, can you what things went on that year and have gone on in at Lamplight over the years since it has been running?
So each year we sort of have like a theme to work off, like a goal to work towards. And the first year, I honestly don't know if there was a theme. I think that was kind of before everyone got their bearings, but the first year was a lot of talking about impression, like not impression, oppression within like the workplace and social environments. And we did a lot of something called Theater of the Oppressed, where we acted out scenarios and what you should do in those scenarios, stuff like that. But one main thing we also did the first year was we wanted to find some way that the community was suffering so we could, maybe try to potentially solve that for them. And so we went out and canvassed the citizens, and a lot of them said their biggest concern was there was nothing to do in Marshall County. They were bored. And so we decided to throw like kind of an end of the summer party type thing for them, like invite everyone for the community completely free. We had snacks, games. I think we had a movie. We had quite a few we had an art competition, I believe. And then after that, like I said, after the first year, everyone kind of got on their feet. And so one main theme we had over the years was I talked about it a little in my bio, but the simulation year.
Hmm.
This was where the staff decided to create a real world simulation based off of fake money they had printed. Everyone called it tendies for some reason. And we had to do jobs, obviously, to earn the money. And then we would pay for things like our meal times. We all had our own assigned chairs, which was our property. Um, a lot of people were unhappy about this, but then people started buying random objects all over our space. Like I think two people bought the playground, so no one else could go on it. That's when we decided to purchase the stairs and charge everybody a toll for them, and they weren't happy about that either. Um, but eventually they talked us down to let them on it when it was necessary. But other than that, they had to pay us a toll. So I think that one really taught us about how much of the world revolves around money
Hmm.
and how important it is to be able to manage that correctly. And so many years like that are basically about teaching life skills. And I think the last year, not last year, but the one before, our theme revolved around history of the area. And so we did a bunch of like oral storytelling, and we asked campers to ask their parents and guardians for stories and just basically the history of the land. So every year has definitely been about a teachable moment. And I think that, I don't know how to say this. I'm so sorry. Um, I don't know. Julia, help me out.
Help you with what? You're doing
What am
great.
I trying to
Yeah.
say?
You think that
I
these
can't, I don't know how to word it. I don't.
Are you trying to say something about how like these essential questions are important? I do think one of the things that you're talking about, Kayleigh, is camp and the way that we design camp are kind of around these like essential questions or problems each year. And one of the ways that we come up with that are that you help us. The campers help us, right? We have these
Oh,
Zoom
yes, it
calls.
is. It is.
Yeah, is that it?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, that
Right.
is really it's really striking to me. The much of what passes for education or entertainment or just activities for young people is actually not connected to the real world, right? And it's what's happening. What you're describing is so distinctly not that, right?
Mhm.
You're engaging with the economy, with politics, with local history, with the place there in this dynamic way, which is it's really cool. I wonder, this is where you've grown up. I mean, what have you learned about your place there that you didn't know before? You feel like you understand it in deeper, kind of more complex way?
So before I went to Lamplight, I think most people my age are in their little angsty phase, like, oh, I just want to get out of this small town. I don't want to be here. I'm gonna move away. But through the years, as I went to Lamplight and just embraced the community, honestly, it made me have a deep love for Alabama and where I come from, and it made me want to help stay and better it rather than run away and leave it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really awesome. Yeah, one of the things that struck me, I mean, when I met Daniel and a couple other people early on working on this back in 2019. Deep Springs and Telluride, engage college age students in self-governance, right? They turn significant amounts of, decision making authority and money and things to young people who are young adults, 18, 22-year-olds, something like that. And that seems pretty radical to a lot of people in the society. Would that work? Is it going to, do they have the knowledge and the wisdom and experience to do this? And so to hear about the idea of applying this to people who are not even high school students, who are middle school students, who are younger than that, is very striking and courageous. And I wonder, yeah, both of you, what has your experience of that been? In like student empowerment, Julia, you wrote about, as a key thing. Should we entrust more decision-making power to 13-year-olds and young students?
Yeah. I mean, we would all be eating pizza and playing video games. It would be awesome. I think yeah, 100%. I think also to go back to your question and to think a little bit more about like the ethos, right, and the pedagogy, I think that is something that is so deeply steeped in all of these Nunnian institutions, and we all think about the way that we come at, right, the way that we come to our pedagogy in slightly different ways and angles, which I think is really beautiful. And whenever I read something about like Arete or Outer Coast or Deep Springs, I'm like learning how people are doing things differently. I think something that we really have thought about, and Kayleigh, of course, correct me here if you disagree, is I think a lot of our founding members who have been involved in other Nunnian institutions have had really positive and really challenging experiences. I think with any like insular, odd, small thing, I think one thing that many of us were struck by is how insular some of these educational like apparatuses can
Mhm.
be. And so Deep Springs is an incredible thing. It's really cool to, live like somewhere far away from everyone and learn how to work on a ranch and read like the most amazing things that you've ever read with a group of like uh, 12, 16, I don't know exactly how many people are in a class anymore, but with a small group of people and like decide the professors that you're gonna hire. That's amazing. The thing that I always think about is how do people like find out about those experiences? TAS and Telluride are incredible experiences. How do people find out about that? And sometimes they are publicized, right? Publicized outside of this like insular academic bubble, but a lot of times it's people have heard about it because they are deeply involved in the world already. They have a parent or a family member deeply involved in the world. They have a parent that has the time to be attentive to look up these programs with them, or they have an older sibling or someone at their school, someone in their hemisphere that told them about that. So I think growing up in Ithaca, and this is a little bit of like my bias and my perception, seeing all of these resources and all these resources that Cornell and Ithaca College had, but the way that only some of them were utilized for a select few group of students, I think is something that I saw at an early age, something that like angered angered me at an early age. I went to a great public school. My public school is really heavily tracked. If you
Mm.
went like AP or honors classes, you did not see anyone who was taking Regents or like normal classes at all. This all goes back to your question because I think a lot of us have learned that like these alternate educational areas are so important for like finding out who we are, finding out what we care about, and anybody can benefit from them at any age. And I think it might look different than at Telluride or at Deep Springs. But I think that's where a lot of the founders were coming from. Okay, this is a really important experience. Self-governance is so important. And maybe even if you don't go to a really fancy college, or if you don't go to a college, the
Mm.
skills of learning how to be in a self-governed space will help you regardless of where you go from there.
Yeah, that's really powerful. I think that certainly resonates with my own experience as well. I grew up in a small town, rural Wisconsin here, and went off to Deep Springs, and it was a really different world. That the world of elite education, people who were going on to Ivy League schools or just thinking about that in general was really different from the context I was growing up in, and yeah, I totally, it's certainly important part of my work that yeah, this education does not just for an elite, not just for the for it really is, it's something that is impactful and a very wide audience. And I think I really admire Lamplight for expanding not only the kind of the range of the types of students and their backgrounds, but also the age, right? This is a that I think is it's great pioneering work that's being done there. Kayleigh, can you add anything to that? I mean, coming into a context in 2019 where you were, uh, asked to, given the opportunity to really create a space where decision making and self governance could happen. And I mean, that story you told about kicking the staff out and taking charge about what's this program about is really striking, right? Like what allowed you to have the confidence to do that, and what was that experience like when it was just getting started?
I think honestly, the staff at the beginning were kind of building us up to something along those lines. I think they were almost pushing us to see how much we would take before we took control of it ourselves. And there's a saying now that every year, if the staff aren't kicked out, then it's a bad year. Um, so I think honestly, just them creating that environment for us to feel power over ourselves and for once not to be, I mean, yes, we were still treated at like an age appropriate level, but not to be treated like little kids who couldn't make decisions for themselves. I think that really empowered all of us to feel comfortable and confident enough to take that step. And I think also that the staff really, I want to say I don't want to think, I don't think they expected it, but I think they definitely like were, like I said, pushing us towards that for something to happen, almost like goading us into it a little bit. But I think when that happened, they were very proud of us for taking everything they had taught us and like combining it all into that specific moment, even if they wanted to be included in the room. Sorry that didn't happen, but I think honestly, just them being there and being supportive and building us all up is what gave us the confidence to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think one thing that's striking about your bios and the story, as I understand it, of the organization is there are so the Nunnian sort of Telluride Deep Springs kind of route is an important one, but there are others as well. And I think sounds like part of the education that allows a that encourages, cultivates students' empowerment is are things like theater of the oppressed, talking about co-ops, talking about labor organizing, things like that. So I'm wondering, yeah, if either of you could talk about some of the other streams of influence and like inspiration for this work, and then maybe that can get into to talking about Sand Mountain as well.
Yeah, I think a big influence that I think was mentioned maybe briefly earlier is Miles Horton and the Highlander Folk School.
Mhm.
And so Miles Horton is somebody who was from Tennessee. He came to the North to study actually at Teachers College, which is cool to walk by and see at the theology school, and then brought his ideas back to the South. Was deeply, I think, interested in place-based education and helping people empower themselves in a specific and certain place. And so founded the Highlander Folk School. It became very, very prominent during the civil rights movement. Many people in the South, like MLK and Rosa Parks, would go and train at his school. And it was kind of one of the first places where teachers and labor organizers were involved in trainings together. And I think that it has been a deep-seated influence for many of us who are history teachers, humanities teachers, have both taught in public schools and in these more like niche spaces. Is something that we draw a lot of inspiration from. Actually, can I get something and come back to the camera because I do
Sure.
have something in my apartment that is related to this.
Yeah, well, Julia is away there. I mean, I can just mention Miles Horton. Another. We've explored a little bit of his story, and we'll do more in the future on the podcast. The and of Highlander. I mean, Highlander is also, folk school. He spent some time in Denmark at the International People's College Folk High School, where I got to visit this summer, and so the vision of the folk high schools in Denmark and Scandinavia, I think it has a lot of resonance of what we've been talking about here, building up, education in place, very, very egalitarian, very much empowering of people, and people of all ages. So it's Miles Horton, Highlander, and then also the John C. Campbell Folk School in North Carolina. These some of the important early examples of this movement that are also, I would say, linearly connected to what we're doing at Thoreau College, and it's cool to see this Nunnian folk school kind of connection popping up in Alabama too. What do you have there, Julia?
Yes. Okay. Sorry. Also, my buzzer is like freaking out. Somebody's trying to get into the apartment. If you hear that loud sound. Okay. So this is a postcard from the 1960s. Try to get it close to camera without the glare.
So
Um,
for people who are just listening in audio, just describe what we should see in this picture.
yeah. Wait, Kayleigh, did you know this image? Can you see what's going on?
I can't see what's going on.
You want to describe it?
No,
Oh, you can't. Okay.
you
This
have no.
is
I can see the image, Julia, but I have no idea where you're going with this. But I'm
Okay,
eager
this
to
is
learn.
a postcard from the 60s. This was taken at the Highlander Folk School. Up here, this says Martin Luther King at Communist Training School. There is a big arrow that is pointing to King in the right-hand corner, and this is something that was used as propaganda in the 60s against the civil rights movement, and Miles Horton was implicated in this as well. This is like an image that you can find online. Actually, some of our friends, and I think at Lamplight at our cabin, we have an image of this blown up just because it's kind of hilarious. I was moving a couple months ago and was like, wow, like my friends have this image blown up. Maybe I'll also like print it out at Kinko's and blow it up. And then I saw for $10 on eBay, there was the actual real life postcard. And it was one of my favorite purchases that I've ever made. So it's
Yeah.
hanging about 3 feet away from me.
It's an incredible piece of history, and it's it really is. It's no joke, really. Like the Highlander Folk School was dispossessed of their land
Yes.
there in that
Yes.
era, and they really, the kind of Jim Crow era governments of Tennessee were not happy about what was going on there, and I mean that continues to the present day. They had an incident of arson at their current site not too long ago, and yeah, they really are an example of courage and action, and and at the core of it is this democratic education. That we're talking about here today. So yeah, so part of the Highlander was labor organizing in Appalachia and as well as civil rights organizing. So can you talk about the Sand Mountain Cooperative Education Center and some of the other some of this other strand of the work that's happening?
Yeah. Okay, this is where the alphabet soup starts, which
Okay.
is so I'm gonna try to keep it as simple as possible, and you tell me if you get confused. And
Sure.
this is honestly probably one of the things that's most akin to the labor organizing world. A lot of folks who are involved in SMCEC and Lamplight, like myself, mainly come from, I would say, social action, organizing backgrounds, or teaching, or both. And in the labor organizing world, there are like a million acronyms and everybody's making them up all the time. Nobody knows what they mean. So, Lamplight started, and Kayleigh, you fact check me too, or add
Okay.
more if you want to. Lamplight starts in 2019 as the flagship program, this 3 week long summer camp. When we first became a 501(c)(3) incorporated and got nonprofit lawyers, right, did all the things legally, we were known as Lamplight, and our umbrella organization was known as the Sand Mountain Cooperative Education Center, so the SMCEC. In like the early days, and still legally on paper, you can write a check to the SMCEC or Lamplight. It's legally the same thing. It's one organization.
And you
For,
should.
pardon?
You should write a check so that very well
Yeah,
thought
we'll
thing.
get there at the end. Giving Tuesday's coming
Giving
up.
Tuesday is coming up, right? Yeah.
Yes. So one and the same. And for I think about 4, 5-ish years, most of the folks that were working at Lamplight were living in New York City or in other places across the South and in Alabama, where largely teachers and social workers had other full-time jobs and would come to Lamplight over the summer. So it was like just this one thing. Okay, we're teachers, we're all friends, we have summers off, we have this other job, and then we go and do this thing that like we're super passionate about and are figuring out. Then, about 3 years ago, oh my gosh, so sorry. This
Can't hear
buzz
it
is
actually.
crazy. I live on like the second floor of an apartment, and so when people try to get in, like they buzz like crazy. So
No
I
worries, it's
apologize
okay.
about that. Okay. Yes. So people would, for many years, largely not live in Alabama and come down for camp. About 3 years ago, two of our co-founders, Daniel, who it sounds like you're acquainted with, and our very good friend Kevin, quit their jobs teaching in the NYC Department of Education as history teachers and moved to Alabama full time. And that's when we started adding more acronyms to this alphabet soup and basically started creating more projects that were happening at the same time as Lamplight. So that's when, about 3 years ago, we created Glow and Grow, which Kayleigh has worked on, which is one of the things that I have co-created. And that came out of a need, as we just talked about, for nonprofit funding. We were finding that we were talking to the same people, sometimes finding enough money for camp, sometimes not. So figured out that the best way to solve the problem was collectively was for us to write grants and was for us to teach our students and kids how to write grants. And that kind of snowballed a little bit. So we have now been able to fund ourselves for the last couple of years and work with some really amazing, important community partners. That's one acronym. We've also been doing some other things with cooperative education and cooperative development in Alabama. So this is one of the main things that our friend and partner Kevin Burns is working on. He's currently the executive director of the Alabama ALCEO, which is the Alabama Center for Employee Ownership, which we created a couple years ago with EOX. And his main job, which is he does on top of Lamplight and on top of a lot of things, is meeting with small business members in Alabama who are interested in selling their businesses and turning it into a cooperative structure. So going back to what we were talking about a couple of minutes ago about how these structures and like self-governance, popular education can be used in so many different formats. They're really important in Deep Springs and in Telluride and equally important outside of the classroom. The like small scale version for high schoolers and middle schoolers is Lamplight. The large scale version for adults is cooperative education. So
Mhm.
that's something that we've started doing in the last couple of years too. So we have like many different many different arms and legs that is under the umbrella of the SMCEC right now. Kayleigh, did I miss anything? Do you want to add
No,
something?
I think you got it.
Yeah, there's the acronyms are inevitable in this work, and it's also the Nunnian world, all kinds of acronyms. But I think that the core message, the core idea here is really powerful. I mean, this yeah, very well put. Like we have this participatory governance for people of all ages, right? From middle school all the way to adults in their workplace, is it's such a powerful idea. And again, also, I mean, I'd like to note it has a relationship to the history of the folk schools in Denmark. There's a collaborative development of the cooperative model of business organization of economic activity in Scandinavia, which is very well adapted, very robust there, and it evolved at the same time as this folk education movement. And so, yeah, empowering people, developing people's pride of place, as Kayleigh is describing, and yeah, empowerment to take charge of their economic life is closely related. Awesome. Yeah, and this glow and grow is really cool as well. I mean, I think that as a person who's worked in the nonprofit world since I was a kid, right, in high school, this world of like how do you access the big pools of money out there? How do you tell your story? That's such it's an empowering thing to know how to do, and mysterious if you don't. So maybe you could talk a bit about how you approach that. Where did the idea come from, and how has it worked out?
Yeah, that's interesting. It came out of need, honestly. I don't know if you have ever found yourself in these very like peculiar rooms or places throughout the years. A couple years ago, or a couple months ago in the spring, I was celebrating a friend who's also actually on the board of the SMCEC, was celebrating his 30th birthday in New York, and he's a really big fan of the Russian Turkish bathhouses. So we were sitting in these bathhouses, which are where you go to sweat and you go in between. It's a school integrated space where you go in between like really hot and really cool places. And if you get a bunch of people who went to Telluride and Deep Springs together, this is what they talk about when they're sweating at the baths. And so someone that I had met for the first time, we were talking about Glow and Grow. He also is like in the nonprofit space or something. And we're like, we are schwitzing. And he turns to me and he was like, so how did you find yourself in the grant writing space? Like, how did you become passionate about this work? And the only way that I could answer it, much to what you said, is because I needed to, because I care about this work first. I think that it's very important, and we, exist in a place where you have to come up with your own funding. So it was very much out of need. This is one of the things that I did when I was a new staff member and Lamplight member about 4 years ago. I worked all throughout college. I worked at many different nonprofits, which was really cool and showed me that no matter how cool an organization is and no matter how passionate executive director is, 90% of the things that people are focused and worried about is how they can fundraise money and like who they need to talk to keep the doors open. And I was shocked and kind of appalled, honestly, when I learned that before I came on. I don't think, and Kayleigh, maybe I'm wrong here, I don't think we had applied to a single grant.
No.
We like to, yeah, I like to say that like our, four founders had raised our money each year based off of Riz or like charisma. Every year they just talk to
Can I
people.
tell a funny story about this?
Please.
Yeah.
Sorry, Kieran, for what I'm about to say. Kieran actually, one of the original people working on Lamplight, he worked at a bar, and when rich customers would come in, he would basically pitch Lamplight to them and try to get them to invest in us. And that's how we got a lot of our funding the first few years.
That's
This
a great strategy, actually.
It's a great strategy,
It's
and
got to
maybe
work
we
for the
should
right
keep
bar.
doing it. Yeah, and it has to be the right bar. It has to be the right people. But that's exactly how we got funding. And I mean, we were lucky enough to be in this world where we were roommates with Estonian architects and knew, like professors, and our parents were passionate about this, and our family members would donate. Which I also think there is a certain amount of privilege in like being in that space where you have a network that can do this. But I noticed that each year we went from $0 in our bank account to the amount of money that it takes to run camp every year. And while that's like an amazing feat and takes a lot of charisma and like Kieran is a great bartender, I was like, wow, like we have so many different side projects and things that we're passionate about. what if we knew where a little bit of that money was coming from each year and could take the energy that we would use to like romance rich people that walked into our bars and used it to like plan a lesson, do these other things that we never have time for. Because I'm sure you've also experienced in the nonprofit world, you're in the nonprofit industrial complex. There's this like vocational awe of if you love and are passionate about the work you do, you should overwork and underpay yourself. And there are always like a million things to do. So I came in and was like, there are so many things to do. I think fundraising is kind of boring, but I think it's a necessary evil. And if we get good at it, then we can do more of the fun stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think every nonprofit needs to raise money. It's part of the game, part of the functioning. But most nonprofits do not turn that into programming, right? So that's a really cool thing about this. And again, it's so well connected with the mission there that yeah, bringing the campers, bringing the students, bringing your wider community into this work is yeah, that then ripples outwards to other projects beyond the organization itself.
I think so. I think like one last thing on that. You mentioned the Danish folk school models and how there is some marriage there with the cooperative models. We have some of our friends and Daniel now, when he's not doing all of this and running around doing a million projects in Alabama, he works for a biotech company called Ginkgo. That is like one of the largest biotech companies that is going worker owned. And so a couple years ago, he and some of our friends were able to go on this really cool research trip vacation to Bilbao, and they were able to visit Mondragon, which
Oh
is
yeah,
where, yeah, there is,
cool.
a huge impetus that kind of started or were some of the founding fathers for a lot of modern cooperative work. And one of the things that they were told when they were visiting this area in the Basque Country over and over again is their motto is solve every problem with a cooperative. That's what they did, and that's how they built this city where everybody works in a job that is like a normal job, but they have stock in their business, is that they fixed everything through a cooperative lens. And I think that's what we attempted to do with that, and then with the teacher brain of how can I learn from this and how can I help others learn from this too, is how we developed Glow and Grow.
That's awesome. Yeah, Mondragon is another inspiring story. People should look that up. It's yeah. There's hundreds of businesses under the umbrella of Mondragon, and thousands of workers. So yeah, it's remarkable. Awesome. Well, that I mean, the breadth, the tentacular octopus nature of this really appeals to me. I think that yeah, yeah, and it's really cool the way to see that has also drawn in people from the local area, but also from other kind of circles there, people living in New York City and elsewhere who get passionate about this work, and I think yeah, it's been fun to watch very distantly it develop since the first we're gonna run a summer camp, and now we're and now we're educating people about cooperative organizing and worker ownership in companies, and yeah, it's really cool. Um, yeah, I guess I'm wondering if the we talked about supporting this work. I'm wondering if there is ways that people who are not in Northern Alabama, or other ways that people to connect with this work, or is there the audience for it is local, or are there programs or offerings that people from anywhere else can connect with?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, as we said, Giving Tuesday is coming up. So if folks are interested in supporting our work, they can go. We have two different websites. One is lamplightsummer.org and one is education co-op.org, cooperative education co-op. I
We'll
will
we'll have
send
links,
you
both of those links into the notes for the
exactly.
show. So
And
check it out
yeah,
below the yep.
so that has more information on some of our partners and on all of the programs. And I would say the one of the last like brand new projects that we are working on, something that we didn't talk about yet, is 2 years ago we actually started a second Lamplight program in Birmingham
Uh-huh.
and have another house in Birmingham. So for the past 2 summers, we've been doing 3-week programs in Birmingham and then in Guntersville, which has been amazing. And one of the things that we've been doing, it just like many organizations, I think a classic thing, trying to get people together in a specific place in Birmingham and Guntersville, have them talk about what they want. And in the last couple years or last couple months, after doing these dinners and talking to folks, there are some people in Birmingham that are really interested in creating something that maybe one day will be a reminder or like be a folk school, basically, will look
Mhm.
like or feel like or be a folk school. So we are starting to have some meetings both for people that are specifically in Birmingham and people that are not in Birmingham but want to be involved. And I think all of these places like Monroe College, learning more about micro colleges have been such an inspiration. So if folks are interested either on the ground or elsewhere, they should send us an email and just talk to us. I think the best thing too in the last couple of years, Kayleigh, I don't know if you feel this way. I just like talking to strangers so much. Is talking to people who are in this work, are interested in this work in some way, I think is how I've met some of my closest friends and my favorite collaborators. And we always have time to talk to somebody that's interested in the same things that we are.
Yeah, I think you can hear that someone has a good idea. You have folks there who are ready to listen. So that's really cool. Yeah. Well, we're coming up to the top of the hour here, and yeah, I just want to thank you both so much for telling us about this really interesting project. I'm really excited to be able to share some information about it with the world. I'm excited to meet you here in Wisconsin here in a couple months, Julia. And yeah, good luck with your college, Kayleigh. And yeah, thank you for your work.